Hi guys, welcome back to Tashida's Lit Lounge where literacy is lit. And today I am continuing the march on Washington. We are on chapter 2 called Jim Crow Laws. And before we begin, Jim Crow Laws chapter will give you a brief understanding, just a little bit, of why the Lit Lounge is so important and the value that it holds, because it's very important that you strengthen your literacy skills, because we have not always been afforded the opportunity to be literate, okay? Not all of us. So listen closely, and I hope you enjoy chapter 2, Jim Crow Laws. The United States of America became a country in 1776 with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The document states that all men are created equal, but this statement did not apply to everyone. At the time, most Black people in America were enslaved, and they were not considered equal to white people. The first enslaved people were brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619 from Africa. They were forced to work without pay. Many families were torn apart when children were sold away from parents. These enslaved people had no rights at all. By 1861, the country was deeply divided over many issues, including slavery. The Civil War broke out, and over the next 4 years, soldiers from the northern states, the Union Army, and southern states, the Confederate Army, fought one another. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared all people enslaved in Confederate states free. But people in the South ignored the proclamation. The war and slavery continued. It wasn't until 1865, after the war ended, that Black people who had been enslaved in America officially became citizens. But being free did not mean that Black people were treated the same as white people. Prejudice and racism still existed, especially in the South. From the 1870s through the 1950s, some states created laws that segregated or separated Black people from white people. Black people were not allowed into many hotels, stores, and hospitals. Many restaurants and theaters had separate doors and seating areas for Black people. Public buildings had separate drinking fountains, often marked white and colored. Black people had to ride in the back of the bus. Black and white children went to separate schools. Schools for Black children usually had fewer books and supplies than schools for white children, and the buildings were often in poor condition. If Black people did not follow the laws, they could face punishment, including jail time or even death. Living under these conditions was very frightening for Black people in the South. All of these rules were part of the Jim Crow Laws. The term comes from a fictional character of that name. When a white performer dressed up as Jim Crow, he would darken his face with charcoal and make fun of Black people. Jim Crow is a negative way of talking about Black people, and Jim Crow laws unfairly segregated Black people from white people. The fear of being punished for breaking these laws controlled nearly every part of a Black person's life. Jim Crow laws did not exist in the northern states, but Black people living there still faced segregation and discrimination. They could be refused services in stores, restaurants, and hospitals. They were not given equal chances to get jobs. Often, a white candidate would be hired over a Black candidate, even if the Black candidate had the same qualifications. It was difficult for Black people to buy houses in certain neighborhoods, especially if the neighborhood was mostly white. But when a Black person from the North visited the South, they had to follow Jim Crow laws. Richard Hill lived in St. Louis, Missouri. When he was 5 or 6, his mother took him and his brothers to Mississippi to visit their grandmother. His mother had told her boys about the segregation laws in the South. Richard thought they were just stories. But in Mississippi, he realized that his mother was telling the truth. It was a huge shock. Richard later said that his mom told him that he could be anything he wanted, but that I'd have to work 3 or 4 times harder to get it, whereas a white person, just being white was their free admission. Visiting the South helped Richard understand what his mother meant. Black people faced many challenges trying to vote for politicians who would help change these unfair laws. In some southern states, Black people were charged a poll tax. This meant that they had to pay money to vote. A lot of Black people couldn't afford the fee, and without it, they could not cast their ballot. Most white people did not have to pay the poll tax. In other southern states, Black people often had to pass a literacy test to vote. The test was given by a white person who could make the test as hard as they wanted. John Lewis, a Black American politician and civil rights leader, recalled, on one occasion, a man was asked to count how many bubbles on a bar of soap. White people voted without having to pass any kind of test. The Jim Crow laws restricted life for Black people in the South. Under these laws, Black people did not have the same rights as white people. In the North, Black people did not have equal rights either. Something had to be done to fix these injustices. And here's a story from Melody, A Lasting Memory. Once, when I was only 4, my grandparents took me south. It was very hot, and the lemonade in Big Mama's thermos was gone. I was still thirsty, so when Papa stopped at a gas station in Alabama, I begged for a drink. There was a Coca-Cola machine, red and white and shiny. Papa gave me a nickel so that I could buy an ice-cold soda pop. Big Mama walked me to the machine, but when we got closer, she said, "Stop, baby." "I want a drink," I said. "I know," Big Mama said, "but we can't today. The machine is broken. Put your money in your pocket now." Big Mama took my hand to guide me away, and I followed her back to the car. That's when a little blonde girl, about my size, went to the machine. She stood on tiptoe and dropped a coin in. Then she reached in and pulled a frosty bottle out of the machine. "It's not broken," I shouted. "It's not! I want a soda pop too," I cried, pulling against Big Mama's arm. But she put me back in the car and we drove away. I remember crying for a long time. It wasn't until I was older and could read that I understood. A few years later, we were again driving south and stopped at a station, this time in Tennessee. I got out to stretch my legs, and I saw the same kind of soda machine. There was a sign above the machine that said, "Whites only." That's when I realized that the machine in Alabama must have had the same kind of sign. When I asked Big Mama why she hadn't told me about the sign the first time, she said, "Because it hurt me too much. I didn't want it to hurt you too." And that is the end of chapter 2, the Jim Crow laws. And we will return with chapter 3, a movement begins. So I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to Tashita's Lit Lounge for more awesome stories. Good night.